Thanks for coming back or joining us on Track 1, Capacity Building. I'm Angie Rowe, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Global Genes. As a reminder, this session is being live streamed through Platform Q, and I would like to welcome our remote guests. This session is all about the steps you need to take to transition from a fully volunteer-run organization to having paid staff helping drive things forward. I have the honor and privilege of not only being your track host and mic runner, but also a presenter today. And I'll today be joined by Meredith Cagle. Meredith is the Executive Director at the Foundation for the Undefeated. She is graciously pinch hitting for us. Our regularly scheduled speaker took a fall and is unable to be here with us. So Meredith graciously agreed to step in so that we would have someone else to go over these things. So that you have a little background about Meredith and I, we worked together about 10 years ago. I'm going to date ourselves. We were on a board of directors for an all-volunteer organization together. So we spent quite a few years working in an all-volunteer organization when our kids were younger. And Meredith and I now have gone, both of us, out and taken that training that we received and are now paid staff at nonprofits. So it's been an interesting evolution for Meredith and I. We both have been on both sides where we were with all volunteers and now are transitioning and working places as staff when you're in a nonprofit. And so it's been an interesting change, especially for me. But we're all in it together. We're all going through the same things, and we're all, Global Genes has grown tremendously in the last 2 years and has transitioned from all contractors to paid staff and gone through a lot of these things. So I'll be speaking more of the nitty-gritty about that, but Meredith is going to kick it off with her portion, and I'll let you.
Great. Well, thank you and welcome, and thank you, Angie, for inviting me to be here. I think. How many of you, first of all, how many of you were at the last session, just in this room before? Okay, because so there was really at the end, I think they did a transition for us that they were unaware of, where they talked about using volunteers and, what's your next step in terms of managing volunteers and things like that. By show of hands, how many of you completely volunteer run at this point? So okay, a lot, really. Okay, does anyone have paid staff currently? So some. Okay. So as Angie said, I'm going to start with a little bit of the strategic stuff you should think about before you start making hires, so that as you're adding staff, it is in a strategic and sustainable manner. So I'm not going to read this whole quote here, but I do want to say that the yield from the human resource is really determines the organization's performance, and how you make those people decisions, who you hire, who you fire, where you place those people, who you promote, and the quality of those decisions is going to determine how successful your organization is moving forward. Probably, if you've been a volunteer organization, all volunteer organization, you're looking at that next level of staffing to start to grow your organization, or because it's become unmanageable to continue completely as a volunteer organization. So, excuse me. So first things first, you need to assess what your human resources are at your organization and what your needs are to move forward. Every organization is different. There is no first step that will apply, the first position you should hire, or how you go about doing it. And your reasons for adding paid staff will vary. So you have to think about, how did your organization start? For what purpose? Do you have a clear mission and an idea of where you want to go with it? Your hiring process and your hires are going to be more successful if those pieces are understood before you make that first paid hire. I'm going to talk about, again, some of the other things you consider, and then Angie will talk about what it means in terms of hiring that staff to the work that you'll have to do internally to make sure that you're doing it in a professional and legal manner. So, start by looking at who your volunteers and interns and your unpaid staff are, and I use the term unpaid staff. They're still volunteers; they're not being paid, but your volunteers may be there for different reasons. Why are they committed? Do they have personal ties to the leader, to you personally, to the cause? Or do they come for community service because you've, tapped into a resource in your community, you live near, a college, and there's some intern or volunteer opportunities for people? And are they occasional volunteers? Do they come in, or are they task-oriented? They're coming in, you put out a call for need, you're having an event, you have administrative tasks, and you want them to come in. Or are they what I call the unpaid staff, who are basically your full-time staff and they're not getting paid? That might be yourself as an executive director, and you're putting in 60 hours and not being paid. You may have full-time administrative help. That is a volunteer unpaid position. Or your volunteers may be more transient. They come in, they're there for a little bit. And that's going to determine, again, what your steps are moving forward and what the skills are. So the first thing you can start is assess your organizational needs. You need to do an honest assessment of your current and your future needs, and the external influences. What is the workload history at your organization? And review the trends in the larger philanthropic community. This doesn't mean you need to go out and do a study. Ask around, talk to people, get on websites, find maybe similarly sized organizations to you. Obviously, great networking opportunities here and through lots of community work and work that you're doing, and just ask around as to what was successful for people, and what models or org structures they're using. And be aware of the changes going on in the environment that you operate, and things that may influence your organization moving forward, and therefore influence your resource needs. What are your changing goals for the organization, and what's your operating budget? Largely, probably if you're all operating as volunteer-based, particularly if you're starting out, most organizations don't start out with money in the bank account, or you'd probably be staffing people earlier on. You've had to build that over time. So you need to look at where your funding resources are, and what they're projected to be, and be reasonable about the stability in funding. If you've got a really good structure moving with your volunteers and you're going to bring on a paid staff, you need to be very aware of moving forward if you're going to be able to continue to fund that position, because you could actually bring somebody on, and then if you can't fund them, then you've kind of disrupted your working model to begin with. So, and then look at what the quality and quantity of the area worker pool is, both for your volunteer and staff positions. Who do you already have available to you that's providing consistent volunteer staff work? And then moving forward, who's available that maybe you can't get as a volunteer basis, a different skill set that you need. So really, nonprofits versus for-profits, staffing decisions are among the most important decisions you're going to make. While nonprofits and for-profits operate differently in many ways, when it comes to staffing, nonprofit organizations need to attend to the same tasks as profit-seeking companies, both in the hiring and recruitment process and in the legal aspects, which again, Angie's going to speak about more. And so those fundamentals: fill the positions with people who are willing and able to take on the job. Provide them with an accurate and realistic job description and skill specifications for the position. You want to ensure that the person who the position is filled with is someone capable of handling the responsibilities. Don't set people up to fail, and don't set the organization up to fail. Sometimes employees, as it says here, who are chosen based because they're your friend, maybe they've been a long-time volunteer, because they're in front of you and you're so desperate to get somebody in, is not going to be necessarily the best long-term fit. So if you've waited this long to add your first paid staff, wait a bit longer. Make sure that you're out there looking for people with the skills that you need. And make sure that those are written job descriptions so that they know what they are as well. Screening and selection. So now you've gotten to this. You've decided you have the budget. You've decided who you need to add and where your first paid position is going to be. You know what the job descriptions are. And you're going to start the screening and selection. And whether you've hired, no matter what the position is, all personnel have an impact on the performance. And so, make sure that you're looking at their skills, their attitude, at their knowledge. Look at their reputation in the community, and use a background check. They're inexpensive to do online. I think probably Angie will talk about that. One of the things I don't think that we had a slide on is the recruitment. How do you go out and find people? And so once you've determined what your skills are and the position you need to fill, then you can start to look at in the community what's the best way to get the job out there. And again, you want people who are both skilled for the position you need to fill, and in a nonprofit, you want someone who's passionate about the mission. So you might start with connections, people who have supported the organization in one fashion or another over the years. Maybe it is current volunteers who you want to open up the job to. But I would caution against just necessarily putting someone who's been a volunteer automatically into the position. It's still appropriate to go through a screening and a selection process and have that person come out to be the best skilled person, than to assume that they have the skills that they did as they were a volunteer that transition into a paid position, because there is a different obligation that comes with that and a different commitment level. There are lots of online resources to put jobs out, again, depending on what you're doing. But your best resource, I think, to start with is to just go out to the communities that you work with and the people that you know, Facebook pages, social media, whatever you're using to begin with, local community connections, and things like that. And so it depends what connections you already have. So within that, again, look at what the individual's reasons are for working for the organization. Some people come to nonprofits because they're just burnt out, from the corporate world, and they want to get in and feel good about what they're doing. And while it's good that you want them to have an interest in the organization's mission, and maybe they haven't had an opportunity to give back or find meaning in their work, in their previous work, do make sure that they're coming into it still desiring to give that same level of effort to an organization, have the skills, but additionally have that interest in the mission. And then, when you're interviewing someone, make sure that you're focusing on their strengths, and if the strengths match the job position that you want. Not everybody has every skill. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. If the strengths that they have meet the needs that you have, and they have a good attitude, and you think they fit into the culture of your organization, and they are committed to the mission, then there may be some things that you can, train them to be able to do if they don't yet know how to do it, or they may not be one of their positions or their roles in the future anyway. Orientation and training is vital for success, particularly if you're going to hire somebody who maybe is not familiar with the organization already. If it's somebody who's been involved in the organization for a while, they may already have understandings of different things and have less training in some areas. But you do need to have consistent and well-established guidelines for the training for new employees coming in and your volunteers. So this applies to unpaid staff or volunteers as well. So if you don't train, and I'm sure with volunteers, you've all experienced this at some point, it can make it harder to get the work done than doing it yourself. So you have to invest some time and not expect that a new staff member is going to come on board and be able to just jump right in. There will be some time involved in training them and getting them up to speed. You will need to now address poor performance. Volunteers, ideally, you're also addressing that with them because they can bring down or create chaos or problems at an organization as well. But with volunteers, you're definitely, in my experience, we're all a little bit more flexible. We recognize that they're not being compensated. You don't want to scare them away. You're taking what you can get to get the job done. With paid employees, it's important that you address their poor performance, require a certain level of performance, and don't be afraid to terminate them if it's not a good fit. There's, again, legal things related to all of that come into play, and Angie will touch on some of those. Okay, so any questions just to begin with in that?
You're on your part, you want to do questions now?
Yeah, okay, we'll do questions now for me. Anything to just get started? Okay.
when I came into this session, I had an expectation that you were going to talk about what drives a nonprofit to make a decision to go from all volunteer to a paid staff, and ultimately how that affects their branding, how they're viewed, and those sort of things. Because the majority of the dialogue is about the execution side.
Yes.
But I was interested in understanding how an organization that's been all profit and they can take the position that all their money that they raise goes to the cause and some of those things. So I was interested in a better understanding
Okay.
when a nonprofit organization should consider taking on paid staff. And I know that each, it depends what is, right? You can do all those different scenarios, but ultimately, there should be what I'll call a critical path in terms of the kind of staff that you would want to take on. And in my mind, not knowing any better, that executive director that takes what I'll call the general contractor. And most organizations have different levels of support already that they pay for, whether it's financial auditors that they have to meet certain requirements, or people that manage their websites, and that they're not on staff, but they do support and they
Sure.
get paid, or somebody will gift that specifically, so it doesn't go through the organization's numbers, but it's getting paid by a
Sure.
contributor or a
In
supporter.
kind or-
And that's the kind of, because we're at that point, that point of, should we get the additional capacity, the bandwidth, and the consistency in certain areas. And what comes to mind automatically is the executive director, the website, the social media piece,
Sure.
in terms of marketing strategies, those kinds of.
So I do think,
tasks.
and I'll open that up to anybody else who maybe wants to talk about how they made the transition. It is I do think, based on the mission of your organization and what you're trying to achieve, that is going to help guide the decision of growth for the organization. And if you now have money coming in, you've been volunteering from the beginning and got behind the cause passionately, and there is a time now to have some funding going in and to continue the organization, paying an executive director makes sense. And absolutely, in a lot of cases, would be a first hire for someone. If you find that your growth strategy is dependent on social media and websites and reaching out to a larger community, then again, that makes sense to use. And it may mean that you want to bring somebody on full time to your staff, or even part-time, so that you're controlling on a day-to-day basis. If you feel that it's more project-based, you need somebody to create these things for you and maintain them, but internally you can provide the content, then you might look into using a contractor for that situation, or going out to a company. Depends on resources. My board, for example, one of the individuals on my board owns a website design firm. And we knew that in one of our areas of growth was reaching individuals through our social media and through an online presence. So we actually went out and strategically looked for someone for our board who had that expertise, and in return, his commitment is that they do that for us, create it and maintain it for us for free. So you can look at what you need to do. Marketing examples, another thing. We didn't need somebody full-time, but we did need somebody with marketing expertise. We built our board to recruit some of that expertise. And again, in return, their commitment to the organization, besides traditional board relationships of guiding the organization, their give back to the organization was pro bono marketing services. So I've been able to not hire staff for some areas which are critical to the mission of our organization, but don't necessarily require full-time staff. So I'm not sure if that exactly answered your question.
Well, yeah, and I would say, I'm just going to add on, I think the needs assessment of your organization, like where you are and what are the functions you want to do, I think what happens a lot of times, and other people can chime in, but because I think the dialogue between all of us that are kind of in this is good, but the looking at the what is it you want to accomplish yourself as maybe the founder or the current person that's running the organization or doing all the admin? You know, like sometimes you can get so mired down in the day-to-day details that you're losing the, you know, high level, you know, 30,000 foot visionary piece that is so critical to moving the organizations forward for the long term. And so I think sometimes looking at what you're actually doing as the person who's in that nonprofit and is working on the stuff day to day, and you're like, oh my gosh, all I'm doing is paying bills and answering the phones and doing all this kind of stuff. So is that going to free you up to really focus on those big high objectives and the fundraising and the things that you need to do, continue that? And that being said, the second part of that is, you know, what is your guaranteed revenue and stream coming in? Because one of the biggest considerations, and as the COO and CFO at Global Genes, that I would say to you about hiring is the budget to maintain that staff. Because when you bring a person on, whether it's 1 or whether it's 10, guaranteeing their income and making sure that they have a job is like an obligation that we have to those people that we've brought into this position. So I would say your first factor is budget, but then doing that assessment of what you have and what your needs are in order for you to really move your organization to that next level. If you do have the budget to have a staff person, and what frees you up to do that, and what's your most critical functions you need performed. So I don't know if anyone has anything else they...
So what do they say? Never ask a question you don't have an answer for. The way I would term it is that we have, as nonprofit organizations, we have limited number of resources and talent and skills. And it's imperative on us to utilize those skills, what I'll call core competencies, in the best way we can. And, you know, some folks are better at execution, some are more visionary and strategic, et cetera. And what you said was exactly that, right? Why do you want to have, why are you allocating time and resources to fill out envelopes with somebody that actually should be thinking 4 or 5 years off in this, from a strategic perspective? But the other piece that's critical for us, and it's not necessarily the funding. We're at a point where the funding is not the question. The real question is how do we create additional bandwidth so we can do all these other things that the community wants or needs, really. And you know, that's, you call it, you know, capacity building, and that's really what I wanted. And I wanted to understand if there was any of the other organizations had any trigger points, in some of the experiences, so that I could get your insights, because we're not there yet.
So this session is really timely for us because I've just been interviewing people to be our first paid staff, so last week. So what it came down to for us was that our programs, management of our programs has become so enormous that we just can't handle it as an all-volunteer board anymore. So we got a lot of good counseling from the Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits, and every state has a center for nonprofits, and I really encourage you to reach out to your state's local center. The Washington Center for Nonprofits is excellent, and get some training from them. They've provided just extensive consulting for us on this whole transition, so highly recommend that.
Just quickly, I'll add to ours. It predates me, but what they decided is they had revenue coming in, but they were also advised by the advisory board, what kind of revenue are you looking for? And so certain grants and certain corporate sponsors were going to require that there be paid staff. And so it's also, when you get that certain amount coming in, you want to see, well, where am I going after next? Is it going to be some sort of funding that's tied to having a paid staff?
Hi. Like many of you, we were kind of a needs-based, transition needs-based. I was the first volunteer turned employee because our registry was drowning and we needed to get our registry up and off the ground. That was the #1 priority in 2012. And then it became, we're really bad at getting back to donors and donor retention, and so that became the next major priority. And so we hired a development person, and then that person was drowning. So then we hired a third part-time person to kind of be administrative and support for the rest of us. So I mean, it's basically step-by-step journey on wherever you are in your development of your nonprofit. It's kind of like, what's the biggest fire and what do you need to throw people out? And if that volunteers are not covering that, then you need to start looking at paid.
Thank you.
Okay. Was there anybody else that had anything on this section? My part is so exciting, but.
But very important, very important.
Very important, yes, but very exciting. So, is this my, do I just do this thing? Okay, so, the first thing, when I came to Global Genes, the majority of our staff, most of them are still here today, and, but they were all independent contractors. Oh, I'm sorry. So they were all independent contractors, and I was handed by the board our audit from the year prior, and basically we had 2 years running where they were saying, you guys, you can't do this. Like, you can't continue to have independent contractors. And when we looked a little further into, like, what does that mean and why did that happen, and it was there's certain requirements that if you're functioning, that the IRS kind of frowns upon if you're classifying people as independent contractors. And I'm gonna, so with the independent contractor issue, we quickly learned that if they have a seat in our office and they're coming every day to Global Genes to work primarily on Global Genes business, they can't be an independent contractor because we're not paying payroll taxes and we're not following all those kind of laws and those kinds of things. So when you get into this payroll issue, it does become a complex issue for nonprofits. And you have to, sorry, I'm Italian, I talk with my hands, and I don't like microphones that are stagnant. Okay, your compensation as a nonprofit, it needs to be reasonable. You have to do your due diligence, and all decisions should be made at arm's length. And you can pay reasonable salaries to officers, employees, or agents for services to further your causes, to further your corporations for your tax-exempt purposes. So payroll classification, here's the million-dollar question. Should I pay my staffers as employees or independent contractors? And 95% of the time, the answer is employee. And it doesn't matter what people throw at you or say, you're really there is really no choice to pay these taxes and get people there. And we all try to save money in the nonprofits, and a lot of times people talk about, using these independent contractors as your staff because you don't have to pay the payroll taxes, and I'm going to save money, and that's going to help my bottom line. So it's really not your choice. Even if the staffer agrees to be treated as a contractor, it's contrary to the IRS and state regulations. So basically, the questions you need to ask is, do you have the right to control what the worker does and how the worker does his or her job? And are the business aspects of the worker's job completely controlled by the payer? Like how you're paid, whether expenses are reimbursed, who provides the tools and supplies to them, their desks, their computers, those kinds of things. And are there written contracts or employee-type benefits? So you can do both, right? So we use a lot of independent contractors, but they are people that are not in our office, and they control their work, and they control their schedules and their method of performing their work. So we use independent contractors to help us write our content on our toolkits, right? They are not in our office. We contract with them and ask them to provide certain things to us for those toolkits. And they do the writing, and it comes in, and our staff kind of pulls it together from all our different writers and produces the toolkit. But those people are in control of their work, and we pay them as independent contractors. So you are obligated to withhold payroll. And this was payroll taxes. This was the biggest thing when I came into Global Genes that, the lawyers and the auditors were saying to me was, you've got to transition these people over, because in the event that you do, the money that you're saving by not paying payroll taxes to the people that are in your office and working on Global Genes work from day to day, the money you're saving could get you with one person who gets hurt on the job, is traveling on your behalf or promoting your organization, any of those types of things could come back to you, and the state is going to come after you not just for that incident, but for all your back payroll taxes. So everything you were saving is going to be tied up in you trying to rectify that one situation. So while it seems like on the front end you might be saving money, you're really could get caught and not be. So I think I've kind of covered this. They will come after you for the back taxes, and it's really important that you understand that, and it might not save you money. Okay, and here we get into this whole reasonable compensation. So for employees and execs, the IRS requires that it's reasonable. And when you're dealing with the IRS, what is reasonable? So you have to kind of look at whether or not a charity is exceeding reasonableness with its compensation arrangements. You should be looking at the job description, your required level of education or experiences, compensation averages in your area, the number of hours worked, and the overall budget of the nonprofit. They're not going to look too fondly on a nonprofit that has $150,000 in revenue and is paying their executive director, $120,000, right? So that would not be reasonable. So you really have to take those kinds of things into consideration, and it's going to vary widely from state to state, what size your organization is, where you live in your state, those kinds of things. And then what is due diligence? And it's the brother of reasonable compensation. So in order to have a compensation package considered truly reasonable, the figure must be the result of an evaluation of what makes sense for the job. And it's the responsibility of your board of directors or compensation committee of the board. So you really should have your board structured where you do, when you start hiring staff, that you have a compensation and review committee. So when we come in at the end of the year to our board, we present them with what our compensation packages are going to be for our current staff and what our planned and projected growth is for the year. And that goes to that committee first and is reviewed and then is presented to the board of directors. And then it's considered a best practice to document the method used to determine salary packages. And so there's a lot of websites that you can do to refer to that. And then how do you compensate at arm's length? So you can do all your due diligence, be reasonable, but it's really important that you understand that your execs especially, they don't control the mechanisms of their own pay. So if they're determining, if your execs are determining what their salaries are and how they're compensated, and it's not going to your board and for approval, you're not doing it at arm's length. Like an exec of a nonprofit can't pick their salary. And so that's a very important factor as well. And really when I say all these things and coming from the, your board is there to protect you. So like if you're, that's the board of directors' role, is to step in and to make sure the people that you're paying, and if you are paid staff at a nonprofit, their role is to protect you as that executive or director or that employee, and all your employees really. It's their responsibility to do that as your board. So this also comes up a lot in the 501c3 setting, and I've seen this over and over and over in the work that I've done with nonprofits. People in the for-profit sector, when you're fundraising, no matter what it is, you're in sales, right? You get a bonus and a commission based on what you're selling. And so a lot of nonprofits feel that, well, if they bring in a certain dollar amount, I can just pay them a bonus on what they bring in. I'm going to hire a fundraiser, and that's what I'm going to do. This is very much frowned upon by the IRS. Compensation for your employees should not be tied to money that they bring in. It should be tied to the job description of the position. I mean, yes. I would say to you to get legal advice on any kind of compensation that you would like to do that is related to any type of revenue stream. There are different requirements in every state. I know the state of California, you can hire like a commercial fundraiser to come in and do that. There are provisions for that through our Attorney General. However, the reporting mechanisms and what you have to do in order to do that are quite lengthy and very costly if you don't follow to the letter of the law. So I mean, I would definitely say, that's my cop out right there. And then, of course, you can have benefits for your, pension, retirement, for, health benefits, vacation, sick time. You can establish all those types of benefits for your employees as a nonprofit. And you can expect your employees to contribute to that as well. And, for doing this now as long as I have been doing it in the nonprofit world, I mean, we're all out raising funds. We're passionate about our missions, and we're all doing things to grow our causes and really get our mission out there and get people to buy into it. But your staff, both paid and volunteer, I think we should never forget that is your greatest asset in your organization. They are a resource too. It's not dollars, but they are a very important resource. And they're your doers, and they're your hands and your feet of the organization as it implements the mission. I mean, I couldn't be, honestly, more proud of our staff at Global Genes for this 2 days and what they do. Like, what they've given to you guys, but to the whole community by the amount of time. I know how many hours these guys have worked and how little sleep that they've had to pull this off, and I mean, it's just absolutely exceptional. So I think more than ever, especially for us at Global Genes, this is just a whole year of our work coming together and getting to see that, and it really plays out that they are our greatest resource. We all have limited financial resource, and hiring a team and going through some of the things that Meredith has talked about. I think in what we do as nonprofits, we're so busy, and someone said it to me, I think from Harmony from Hope, we're so busy doing that sometimes we forget that we've got to take a long time to hire and really get the right people in and train them and do those kinds of things, because we're so limited in our resource and we have so much to get done and we're so passionate about our work. So it's a very difficult balance to do all that. But operating as a team is essential. And and it's okay as a nonprofit to say part of your compensation is the value of doing good in the community. Like clearly I'll speak for myself, I'm doing a lot of this because I get paid, but I get paid a lot more in the private sector. I'm doing it because I get to wake up every single day and help people. And that's there's not a value that you can place on that, right? So that's, as for your paid staff, you'll have to just follow the usual rules for having paid employees, and just like every other business. So, and then, I don't know if oh yeah, go ahead.
What's the difference between a permanent and a temporary paid staff if you're starting a new position and you're just not sure what that outcome might look like?
Yeah, what we do is yes, I'm sorry. Oh, again with the mic. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We handle it we do a 90-day probationary period, but we don't go, it's probationary. So it's we call it a continuation of the interview process. I don't know, every state's gonna be different in how they classify employees. It is such a complex issue. We try to go straight from, we do hire, when we hire, but it's on a probationary period. We hire them as an employee, and there's a 90-day window where both parties, but at the end of the day, even if you're bringing them in California, we're an at-will state, so you can kind of sometimes put all that stuff in your contracts, and at the end of the day, it's still at-will. Oh, so, okay, right, okay, I understand. So for us, the sick time and all those kinds of things does kick in at the 90-day mark. So the first 90 days, you're not eligible. So I think depending on how you would write that, if you were gonna do temporary employees, if you could have longer than, I don't know what's legal, we just do 90 days. But their sick time and those kind of benefits kick in at the 90-day mark. But if you're doing 6 months, I don't know what you would have to ask, but yes.
I had a quick question. What is the typical rule of thumb for the ratio of operational costs and then, of course, programming? So I've heard many say 90-10. I've heard 80-20, heard 60-40. What is the typical rule of thumb for operational costs, which would include salaried employees for
Well,
programs?
your salaried employees do not all have to be is not admin. I mean, it's not operating, that doesn't go to your operations. I mean, we at Global Genes, we try to stick with like a 80-20 that we're working on admin. But we've also, since I got there, gone under a very complex classification system for programs. So our staff, and Emily can speak to this in the back, every month get a lovely little email from me that they love to fill out that has every single thing that they have worked on, and they just plug their hours in what they've worked on. And then I allocate their salaries to those programs that they're working on, and those are program dollars. So there are ways that you can work, adding salaried staff does not mean that you're taking your percentage down in how you classify what's program dollars versus admin dollars. It's truly the function of the position. Does that make sense? Yes. Yes. I can be really loud too. Well, apparently I'm not loud enough. But
So I wanted to go back to your slide about compensating at arm's length. In terms of best practices, are you saying that in this rare disease space, a board member could also be a salaried
they can
staff?
receive pay, yes. A board member can receive pay. Like Nicole's on our board of directors, and she's also paid as our CEO.
Okay.
But she cannot set her salary.
Okay.
Do you,
Yeah, obviously.
and she's
yeah.
not involved on any of the committees or any of
Okay.
those discussions.
Okay, I might reach out to you more about
Okay,
that
sure.
because just in terms of like the training that I've been through from our nonprofit center, I mean, it's just different because this is a different space, I think.
But I think you just, there's ways to do things, so.
Are you going to have this presentation on your Global Genes toolkit?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, and a toolkit? Or okay, that's a great suggestion. Emily, we'll take that back to Ashley and say Angie's session is. And yes, we will also have so that you guys, what we're live streaming and all these cameras in all the rooms, within the next couple weeks, we will have produced videos of all these sessions. So they will take out me forgetting to talk to the mic and make it pretty, and it'll be a more presentable thing for you guys to all watch on Rare U. So you just need to give us a few weeks because we have to take both the live stream and the produced video that they're doing in the back, I don't know all the terms, and they'll edit it and put actual on-demand videos up on our website for you guys, so.
We will have that first round of videos up by Monday, though. So there's going to be at least 3 videos that will be up and edited on Rayner University by Monday.
So Emily's from our marketing department, and she's, so we are at 11:45, so if there's one more question.
Last question?
Can we do last question, and then if anybody, we'll be in here if you guys want to talk.
I just wanted to extend that with the president and the executive director position. Can you go on and beyond to the other board members?
Yes, well, you go ahead. How do you?
Into the microphone, Meredith.
Into the microphone, Meredith. You're getting in trouble.
I don't want to give misinformation, so I'm going to say, do you have an answer to
No,
that? We don't compensate any of our board members, but
So there's a website that I'm so tired, you guys. I will let me.
the more time, it's taking to get to the end results, which is treatments and all that. So,
Let me-
everybody's asking about
Yeah.
compensation and how they can get compensated because they're taken away from their own jobs.
Right. Yeah, there are attending meetings. There are some certain things you can do, but can I get your card and let me connect you with someone that can answer those questions. I'm happy to connect you with that, okay? So thank you guys so much for being here and for joining us. And I think I'm supposed to say, hang on, I'm the moderator. Lunch is now proudly sponsored by Vertex.